The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Captain sat in the command chair of the small reconnaissance vessel, her eyes scanning the displays in front of her. The ship was called the Morning Star, and it was far from home. 3 crew members operated the vessel on this mission, commanded, piloted, kept the engines running. They had been traveling for 6 days through the frontier regions. This area of space was new to humans. No one had mapped it properly. Command wanted information about the strange energy readings that sensors had picked up weeks ago. Someone needed to investigate, and his team had volunteered. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said from the pilot's seat. His fingers moved across the controls. "The energy signature is stronger here, much stronger." Leaned forward. "Can you identify it?" "No, ma'am. It's not matching anything in our database. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Looked up from her engineering station at the back of the small bridge. "Captain, I'm getting some interference with our systems. Whatever is causing that energy signature, it's affecting our equipment." Felt something cold settle in her stomach. Years of military experience had taught her to trust her instincts. Something was wrong. "Prepare to turn us around. We'll report what we've found and let command send a bigger ship." But before could respond, every system on the Morning Star went dark. The lights died. The displays shut off. Even the soft hum of the life support system stopped. For 3 heartbeats, there was only silence and darkness. Then emergency power kicked in. Red lights bathed the bridge in an eerie glow. "What happened?" demanded. "We've been hit by some kind of electromagnetic pulse," said, her voice tight with stress. "Main power is completely offline. I'm trying to restart the systems, but nothing is responding." Pointed at the which was running on backup power. "Captain, look." A massive ship was approaching them. It was unlike any vessel had ever seen. The hull was dark purple and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface. It was at least 10 times larger than the Morning Star. "Unknown vessel, this is captain of the human ship Morning Star," she transmitted on all frequencies. "We mean no harm. We are on a peaceful mission of exploration." There was no response. The alien ship moved closer. Could see smaller craft detaching from it, heading straight for the Morning Star. "They're going to board us," said quietly. Stood up. "Get to the armory. Arm yourself, you two. We defend this ship." The 3 of them moved quickly. The small armory held only basic weapons, plasma pistols and 2 rifles, body armor that would stop small arms fire. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. The sound of metal tearing came from the cargo bay. The aliens were cutting through the hull. Positioned herself behind a support beam, her rifle aimed at the door leading to the cargo bay. Was on the other side. Covered them from behind. The door exploded inward. 3 creatures entered the bridge. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with 4 arms and skin that looked like dark scales. Their eyes glowed yellow in the red emergency lighting. They wore armor that seemed to be made of the same material as their ship. Each carried a weapon that looked like a twisted piece of metal, but could see energy crackling along its length. "Stop right there," shouted. The aliens didn't stop. They didn't even slow down. One of them pointed its weapon at. Fired first. Her plasma bolt hit the alien in the chest. It stumbled back but didn't fall. The armor had absorbed most of the impact. Fired 2 and then. The aliens returned fire. Their weapons made a sound like thunder. Energy bolts filled the small bridge. One hit in the shoulder. He screamed and fell. Another hit in the leg. She went down hard. Kept firing. She hit one alien in the head and it finally dropped. She rolled behind another support beam as energy bolts tore through the metal where she had been standing. Her military training took over. She stopped thinking and just acted. Aim, fire, move, aim, fire, move. She took down a second alien, but more were coming through the door, 5 more, then 10. They were overwhelming the bridge with numbers. Fought like a cornered animal. She killed 3 more aliens before her rifle ran out of power. She drew her pistol and kept firing. One alien got close, and she smashed its face with the butt of her weapon. Yellow blood sprayed across her armor. But there were too many. An energy bolt grazed her side, burning through her armor and searing her skin. She gasped in pain but didn't stop fighting. Another bolt hit her in the back. She fell to her knees. Through the pain she saw on the floor, he wasn't moving anymore. Blood pooled around him, was trying to crawl toward the armory, leaving a trail of red behind her. "No," whispered. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't work. The burns were too severe. 4 aliens surrounded her. One of them, larger than the others with more elaborate armor, stepped forward. It looked down at her with those glowing yellow eyes. Then it made a sound that might have been laughter. It reached down and grabbed by the throat, lifting her off the ground with one hand. Punched it in the face with the last of her strength. The alien's head snapped to the side. It made that laughing sound again. Then it threw her against the wall. Her head hit metal and everything went dark. When woke up, she was no longer on the Morning Star. She was in a small cell with white walls that seemed to glow with their own light. Her armor was gone. She wore only a thin gray garment. Her injuries had been treated, but rough scars showed where the energy bolts had burned her. She stood up slowly, testing her body. Everything hurt, but she could move. She walked to the wall and pressed her hand against it. It was smooth and cold and completely seamless. No doors, no windows, nothing. Then a section of the wall became transparent. On the other side, the large alien in elaborate armor stood watching her. Next to it were 3 other aliens wearing white clothing instead of armor. The large alien spoke. The words were alien, harsh sounds that hurts ears. But then she heard a translation in her own language, coming from somewhere in the cell itself. "Human, you are now a specimen for study. You will cooperate with our research. Resistance will result in pain. Do you understand?" Stared at the alien. She thought of dead on the bridge of her ship. She thought of bleeding and helpless. Rage filled her chest like fire. "I understand," she said quietly. "I understand that you've made the biggest mistake of your life." The alien made that laughing sound again. The transparent section of wall became solid white once more. Was alone in the cell, but she wasn't broken, not yet. And these aliens were going to learn something about humans. They were going to learn that humans don't break easily. They fight back, always. The first test began 6 hours after woke in the cell. The white walls suddenly became transparent on all sides. She could see aliens moving around outside, watching her. They wore white clothing and carried strange devices. Scientists thought, or doctors, whatever these creatures called themselves. One of them touched a panel and the temperature in the cell began to drop, felt the cold seeping through her thin clothing. She crossed her arms and tried to stay warm. The temperature kept dropping. Her breath came out in white clouds. Her skin turned red, then pale. She began to shiver uncontrollably. The aliens watched and took notes. They seemed fascinated by her reaction, refused to show more weakness. She stood in the center of the cell and forced herself to stop shivering through pure willpower. She had been through cold weather survival training. She knew how to control her body's responses. After an hour, the temperature returned to normal. His body hurt from the cold, but she had survived. She stared at the aliens through the transparent walls, showing no emotion on her face. The next test came 2 hours later. This time the temperature went the other way. The cell became hot, very hot, sweat poured from skin. The air felt thick and hard to breathe. She sat down to conserve energy and tried to slow her breathing. The heat kept increasing. Her vision started to blur, but she didn't cry out. She didn't beg them to stop. After another hour, the temperature returned to normal. Lay on the floor, gasping for air. Her throat was dry as sand. She needed water desperately, but she wouldn't ask for it. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Water appeared anyway. A panel in the wall opened and a container slid out, crawled to it and drank. The water tasted strange but clean. She drank half and saved the rest. In survival situations, you never knew when you would get more. The tests continued for days, lost track of time in the white cell. There was no day or night, just the harsh, constant light. The aliens tested her limits in every way they could think of. They deprived her of food until her stomach hurt. They played loud, painful sounds that made her ears bleed. They showed her images designed to cause fear or disgust. Through it all, endured. She used every technique she had learned in her military training. When they starved her, she entered a meditative state to slow her metabolism. When they played the sounds, she focused her mind elsewhere, remembering better times. When they showed her the images, she simply closed her eyes. But the worst test was the pain. The aliens had a device that could cause pain without causing injury. They would activate it, and every nerve in its body would scream. It felt like being burned alive from the inside. The first time they used it, screamed. The sound tore from her throat before she could stop it. The aliens seemed pleased. They used the device again and again. Each time the pain lasted longer. Each time fought harder not to scream. She bit her lip until it bled. She dug her fingernails into her palms. She focused on her hatred of these creatures and used it to stay strong. After weeks of testing, one of the aliens entered her cell. It was the large one from before, the one who had captured her. It stood over her, looking down. Through the translation system, it spoke. "You are interesting, human. Most specimens break within days. You have lasted much longer. Why do you resist?" Looked up at it from where she sat on the floor. She had lost weight. Her body was covered in bruises and scars from the tests, but her eyes were still fierce. "Because I'm human," she said, "and humans don't quit." The alien made a gesture that might have been the equivalent of a shrug. "Your resistance is pointless. You will break eventually. They all do. But your stubbornness provides valuable data. We are learning much about your species." "What are you called?" asked. She needed information. Any information could be useful later. "I am head researcher of this facility. We are the most advanced species in this region of space, and you are just another primitive specimen." "Where are my crew members?" demanded. "The others from my ship." Yellow eyes seemed to glow brighter. "The male died during capture. The female died from her injuries. Only you survived. You should be grateful. Now you have the honor of contributing to science." Rage filled his chest. And we're dead. Her friends were dead because these creatures thought humans were just animals to experiment on. She lunged at, moving faster than the alien expected. Her fist connected with its face before the guards outside could react. Stumbled back. Yellow blood dripped from its nose. It touched the blood and looked at it, then looked at. "Fascinating," it said. "Such aggression even in your weakened state. I think we need to increase the intensity of your tests." The pain device activated. Fell to the floor, every muscle in her body contracting. She bit down on her scream and tasted blood. Through the pain, she heard leave the cell. The device kept running for 5 full minutes. When it finally stopped, couldn't move. She lay on the cold floor, gasping for breath. But even then, her mind was working. She had learned something important. She had hit, and it had taken several seconds for the guards to react. The security system had a delay. Maybe only a second or two, but in a fight that could matter. She stored that information away in her memory. Over the following weeks, observed everything. She watched the guards' routines through the transparent walls. They changed shifts every 8 hours. There were always 4 guards outside her cell. They carried weapons but seemed relaxed, confident that she was no threat. She studied the way they moved and communicated. They used both verbal language and hand gestures. She began to understand some of their words, even without the translation system. She noticed that the scientists were smaller than the soldiers. They also moved differently, less aggressive and more careful. She memorized the layout of what she could see beyond her cell. There was a corridor outside with other cells. She occasionally saw other captives, aliens from species she didn't recognize. They all looked broken and hopeless. Some were in worse condition than her. Also noticed patterns in the tests. They always happened at similar intervals. They were methodical, scientific. They followed procedures. That meant they were predictable, and predictability could be exploited. One day entered her cell again. This time it brought a device that looked like a camera. "Human," it said, "you have become quite popular among the. Your resistance to our tests is unusual. We have been broadcasting your sessions to other research stations. They find your suffering entertaining." Blood ran cold. They were broadcasting her torture, using it as entertainment. The rage that had been building inside her for weeks suddenly crystallized into something cold and hard and focused. "I'm going to kill you," she said quietly. "I'm going to escape from this cell, and I'm going to kill every single one of you." Made that laughing sound. "Impossible, you are weak, injured, alone. You have no weapons, no tools, no help. You will die in this cell, human, but please continue to resist. It makes better viewing for our audience." After left sat in the center of her cell and began to plan. She couldn't overpower the guards, not in her current condition. But she didn't need to overpower them. She needed to outsmart them. And despite all their advanced technology, they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed she was just a primitive specimen. They didn't know about her real background. They didn't know she had spent 5 years in Earth's Special Operations Forces. They didn't know she had been trained in escape and evasion, in survival, in turning any environment into a weapon. The thought they were studying her, but had been studying them right back. And soon they would learn what happened when you trapped a human and pushed her too far. She just needed to wait for the right moment, and that moment would come. It always did. The morning star drifted in space, dark and silent. Inside the small ship, lay on the bridge floor where she had fallen. Her leg was badly injured and she had lost a lot of blood. She could barely move. Every breath sent pain shooting through her body. But she was alive. The aliens had taken captain and left the ship. They must have thought was dead. They hadn't bothered to check. That was their mistake. Dragged herself across the floor, leaving a trail of blood behind her. Her vision blurred from the pain and blood loss, but she kept moving. She had to reach the engineering station. She had to send a signal. The captain needed help. They all needed help. It took her 20 minutes to cross the small bridge. Her fingers were slippery with blood as she pulled herself up to the console. The emergency power was still on, casting everything in red light. Most systems were dead from the electromagnetic pulse, but knew the backup system should still work. She had designed them herself to be resistant to EMP attacks. She activated the emergency beacon. Nothing happened. She tried again, her fingers shaking. Still nothing. The EMP had been more powerful than she had planned for. She would need to reroute power manually. Opened the access panel beneath the console. She pulled out bundles of wires and circuits, searching for the damage. There, a burned-out relay. She needed to replace it, but she had no spare parts. She would have to improvise. Using her teeth, she stripped the insulation from several wires. She twisted them together, creating a bridge around the damaged relay. It was crude work and it might not hold for long, but it might work long enough. She tried the beacon again. This time, a small green light flickered to life. The beacon was transmitting, weak but transmitting, programmed in their coordinates, the information about the alien ship and a priority distress code. She included everything she had seen about thee and their weapons. The message began broadcasting into space. It would take time to reach any human vessels, maybe days, maybe weeks, but someone would hear it eventually. Someone would come. Slumped against the console, exhausted. She had done all she could. Now she just had to survive long enough to be rescued. She wrapped her leg as best she could with strips torn from her uniform. The bleeding had slowed. That was good. She found the emergency medical kit and injected herself with pain medication and antibiotics. She couldn't walk, but she could crawl. She made her way to the small galley and found emergency rations. She ate slowly, forcing the food down even though she felt sick. Her body needed energy to heal. She drank water. She took more medication. Then she found a relatively comfortable spot and tried to rest. Meanwhile, light years away, the distress signal was traveling through space at the speed of light. It passed through empty systems and around dead planets. It scattered off cosmic dust and bent around gravity wells. And 3 weeks after activated the beacon, it finally reached a human fleet. Admiral Wu stood on the bridge of the battleship Eternal Watch. He was reviewing supply reports when the communications officer called out, "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal. Emergency priority. Human vessel Morning Star." Wu was at the communications station in 3 strides. "Put it on speaker." His voice, weak and strained, came through. "This is engineer of the reconnaissance vessel Morning Star. We were attacked by an unknown alien species. Is dead. Captain has been captured. Unknown number of hostiles. They used an electromagnetic pulse weapon followed by boarding action. Be advised, hostiles are extremely dangerous. They cut through our hull like paper. Their weapons are energy-based and powerful. Sending coordinates of the attack location and the alien vessel's last known trajectory. Request immediate assistance. Morning Star out." Wu's jaw tightened. The Morning Star. He knew that ship. More importantly, he knew Captain. They had served together 10 years ago during the colony wars. She had saved his life during an ambush on New Terra. She was one of the best soldiers he had ever known. "Communications, send a rescue team to those coordinates immediately, and get me all the information we have on the Morning Star's mission." He turned to his executive officer. "Commander Sung-ho, I want a full strike fleet assembled within 6 hours. We're going after those aliens." Sung-ho looked surprised. "Sir, shouldn't we wait for orders from command?" "Captain is out there, captured by hostiles. Every minute we wait, she's in more danger. We'll inform command, but we're not waiting for permission. Assemble the fleet." Within hours, the human forces began to move. The rescue ship found the Morning Star drifting in space, was barely alive but stable. They brought her aboard and immediately began emergency medical treatment. She gave them additional information about the attack and the ship before falling unconscious. The information was transmitted to Admiral Wu. He studied it carefully. They were advanced, but they had made a critical error. They had attacked a human vessel. They had killed human crew members, and they had captured and were presumably torturing a human captain. Under human military law, this constituted an act of total war. They had no idea what they had started. Wu assembled his fleet. The battleship Eternal Watch would lead. The assault carrier Indomitable, commanded by Captain, would provide the strike force. 3 destroyers and 2 support ships rounded out the formation. The fleet also carried a full battalion of Marines led by Lieutenant, a specialist in ship and station boarding operations. Before departure, Wu addressed his command staff. "Listen carefully. Our mission is to locate and rescue Captain. We will also gather intelligence on this new alien species and determine their threat level to humanity. But make no mistake, if they have harmed Captain, we will make them regret it. They will learn that humans protect their own. Always." The fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel, heading toward the coordinates where the Morning Star had been attacked. They didn't know exactly where they had taken, but they had the trajectory of the alien ship. They would follow it. For 3 weeks, the fleet traveled through space. During that time, intelligence officers analyzed everything they knew about their technology was advanced, possibly more advanced than human technology in some areas. But humans had advantages too. Human weapons were designed for war, not research. Human tactics were aggressive and flexible, and humans had something else. They had a reason to fight. Lieutenant trained his Marines constantly during the journey. They practiced boarding operations in the ship's simulator. They studied the limited information about anatomy, looking for weak points. They loaded their weapons and checked their armor. They were ready. Captain prepared her fighter squadrons. The Indomitable carried 60 combat craft, each piloted by an experienced warrior. If they found the station, those fighters would clear the way for the Marines. Admiral Wu spent his time in his quarters thinking about. He remembered the woman he had served with, strong, brave, stubborn to the point of being difficult. If anyone could survive captivity, it was her. But he also knew that even the strongest person had limits. He prayed they weren't too late. Finally, after 3 weeks of travel, the fleet emerged from faster-than-light speed at the edge of an unknown star system. Sensors immediately began scanning. "Admiral, I'm detecting a large structure in orbit around the third planet," the sensor officer reported. "Matches the profile of the alien ship that attacked the morning star. Much larger, though. I think it's a space station." "How large?" "At least 2 kilometers across. Multiple energy signatures. Definitely inhabited." Wu studied the tactical display. The station was in high orbit around a barren planet. There were no other ships visible in the immediate area. That was either very good luck or a trap. He suspected it was luck. They probably didn't think humans could track them here. "Scan for any signs of Captain," he ordered. The communications officer worked frantically at her station. "Sir, I'm picking up a transmission from the station. It's not directed at us. It looks like an entertainment broadcast. And sir, there's a human in the broadcast. It's Captain." "Put it on screen." The main flickered to life. Wu felt his blood turn to ice. The image showed in a white cell. She looked thin and injured. As he watched, she was convulsing on the floor, obviously in terrible pain. They were torturing her and broadcasting it for entertainment. The bridge went silent. Every officer stared at the screen in horror and rage. Wu's voice was cold and hard when he spoke. "Battle stations, all ships, we're going in." Had been counting days in her head. 3 weeks, 21 days since her capture, 21 days of tests and pain and constant observation, but 21 days of learning too. Learning the patterns, learning the weaknesses, learning exactly how she would escape. Today was the day. She could feel it. The guards had become comfortable. They thought she was broken. The scientists had started running the same tests over and over, bored with her now. Their attention had shifted to other specimens. That was their mistake. When predators stopped watching prey closely, the prey could strike. The test today was a familiar one, the pain device. They had used it so many times that had learned to read the warning signs. The way the lights in the cell flickered slightly before activation, the faint humming sound from the walls. She had maybe 2 seconds of warning. That would be enough. Entered the cell with 2 guards. The large researcher carried a data tablet, already looking bored. "Another session, human. Let's see if today you finally break." Sat in the center of the cell, looking weak and defeated. She had learned to act. Let them think she was giving up. Let them think they had won. She kept her eyes down and her shoulders slumped. Activated the pain device. The lights flickered, the walls hummed and moved. She had been conserving her strength for weeks, eating every bit of food they gave her, exercising in subtle ways they wouldn't notice. Now she exploded into action with all the speed and violence of a trained soldier. She covered the distance to the nearest guard in 1 second. Her palm strike hit the guard's throat with perfect precision. The guard made a choking sound and dropped his weapon, caught it before it hit the floor. She had studied these weapons for weeks. She knew which part to press to fire. Energy bolts filled the cell. The second guard tried to aim at her but was already moving. She fired 3 times. 2 shots hit the guard's chest. The third hit its head. The guard fell. Was backing toward the door, its yellow eyes wide with shock. Shot it in the leg. It collapsed, screaming. She wanted it alive. She wanted it to suffer. The first guard was trying to recover from her strike. Reversed the weapon in her hand and smashed it into the guard's skull. The guard went down hard and didn't move again. The entire attack had taken less than 10 seconds, grabbed weapons from both fallen guards and its data tablet. She looked down at the researcher, who was clutching its wounded leg. "You made a mistake," said quietly. "You thought I was an animal, but I'm a soldier, and now you're going to learn what that means." She shot 3 more times, center mass. The researcher stopped moving, then was through the door and into the corridor. Alarms were blaring, red lights flashed. The other guards were responding, but they were confused. No specimen had ever escaped before. They didn't have protocols for this. Used their confusion against them. She moved through the corridors like a ghost, using every trick she had learned in special operations training. She stayed in the shadows. She moved silently. When guards appeared, she killed them efficiently and took their weapons. Her first objective was the life support control room. She had memorized its location from the map she had seen on a scientist's tablet weeks ago. She reached it in 5 minutes, killing 4 more guards along the way. Inside the control room, 2 technicians looked up in shock as she entered, shot them both. Then she studied the controls. The writing was alien, but the logic was universal. Air circulation, temperature regulation, pressure controls. She began sabotaging systems randomly, creating chaos throughout the station. Her second objective was the communications room. She needed to get a message out. If there were humans looking for her, they needed to know where she was and what they were facing. The communications room was more heavily guarded. 6 soldiers stood outside the door. Couldn't fight them all directly, so she didn't. She triggered a fire suppression system she had seen earlier. Chemical foam sprayed from the ceiling, covering the guards and obscuring their vision. While they were confused, attacked from above, dropping from a ventilation shaft she had climbed into. She killed 3 guards before they knew what was happening. The other 3 tried to fight back, but they were disoriented by the foam. Moved between them like death itself, her stolen weapon firing with deadly accuracy. In 30 seconds, all 6 were down. She burst into the communications room. A single technician looked up from its console, then reached for an alarm, shot the console instead. The technician froze. "Leave," said in the basic words she had learned. "Run." The technician ran, moved to the communication equipment. She had watched the technicians use this system through the transparent walls of her cell. She knew the basics. She activated the emergency broadcast system and began transmitting on all human military frequencies. "This is Captain of the reconnaissance vessel Morning Star. I am being held on a research station. Coordinates follow." She transmitted the station's position, along with everything she had learned about military capabilities. "I have escaped containment and am currently engaged in hostile action against station personnel. Station security is responding. Unknown if I can hold position. If any human forces are in range, please respond. Morning Star out." She repeated the message twice, then destroyed the communication console. They would try to jam the transmission, but it was already sent. If anyone was listening, they heard her. Now came the hard part, surviving until help arrived, if help was even coming. Moved through the station, trying to stay ahead of the guards hunting her. She could hear their heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors. They were organizing now, setting up perimeter sweeps. She was one person against hundreds. The odds were terrible. But had survived worse, and she still had surprises left. She found the detention area where other captive aliens were being held. She opened every cell. Dozens of prisoners poured into the corridors, adding to the chaos. Most ran for the escape pods. Some attacked the guards. It was beautiful pandemonium. Kept moving. She sabotaged power junctions. She triggered more fire suppression systems. She cut through important cables with a cutting torch she found in a maintenance room. Every action made the station less functional and the more confused. But she was getting tired. Her injuries from weeks of torture were catching up to her. She was bleeding from multiple wounds. Her vision was starting to blur. She needed to find a defensible position and make her stand. She found it in a cargo bay near the station's outer hull. The room had only one entrance and plenty of cover. She barricaded the door with cargo containers and took position behind them, weapons ready. The guards found her within minutes. They tried to force the door, fired through it, her energy bolts cutting through the metal. She heard screams on the other side. The guards retreated. They tried again with more forces, fought them off. She was running low on power for her weapons now. She had killed or wounded at least 20 guards, but there were more coming, always more. She checked the weapons. One had 10 shots left, the other had 15 shots. That wasn't enough. She needed a miracle. And then through the hull of the cargo bay she heard something, a sound like thunder. The entire station shook, then again and again. Explosions. Something was attacking the station. Looked out through the small window in the cargo bay, and what she saw made her laugh. A human fleet had emerged from faster-than-light travel. Battleships, destroyers, a carrier. They were all firing on the station's defenses. Help had come. Small craft were launching from the carrier, boarding pods. They slammed into the station's hull like bullets. Marines were coming, human Marines. Activated her communicator. Human forces, this is Captain. I'm in Cargo Bay 7, Section 9. I'm alive and armed. Don't shoot me when you breach. A voice came back immediately. Captain, this is Lieutenant Marine Strike Team. We are coming to your position. Hold on, we're almost there. Slumped against the cargo containers, exhausted but smiling. They had thought they could capture a human and torture her for their amusement. They thought humans were just primitive specimens. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The human Marines cut through the station like a knife through paper. Lieutenant led the first team through the breach point, his assault rifle ready. Behind him came 20 more Marines, all equipped with heavy armor and weapons designed for close combat. They encountered guards almost immediately. The guards fired their energy weapons, but human armor was designed to absorb energy attacks. The Marines fired back with kinetic rounds that tore through armor like it wasn't there. The aliens fell quickly, surprised by the ferocity of the human attack. Keep moving, ordered. We're heading for Cargo Bay 7, that's where the captain is. The Marines pushed forward through the station. More tried to stop them, more died. The humans moved with ruthless efficiency, a product of centuries of warfare. They had fought through worse than this. A space station full of surprised aliens was almost easy by comparison. In the cargo bay, heard the sound of fighting getting closer. Heavy gunfire, explosions, screams. The guards who had been trying to breach her position suddenly pulled back, responding to the new threat. That gave a moment to rest. She checked her wounds. Nothing immediately fatal, but she had lost blood. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion, but she was alive. She had survived, and now rescue was minutes away. The door to the cargo bay exploded inward, raised her weapon, then lowered it. Marines in heavy armor poured through the opening, scanning for threats. When they saw her, they immediately took defensive positions around her. Lieutenant approached, his rifle still up and ready. He lowered it when he saw her face. Captain. That's me, she said, her voice hoarse from weeks of screaming during the torture sessions. Ma'am, we need to get you out of here. Can you walk? Tried to stand. Her legs wobbled but held. I can walk, but we're not leaving yet. Looked confused. Ma'am. This station has data, research data, information about every species they have experimented on. We need it, and we need to free any remaining prisoners. She grabbed the lieutenant's arm for support. I also need to send a message to these bastards, a message they won't forget. Nodded slowly. Understood, Captain, my team is yours. For the next hour, the Marines secured the station section by section. They fought back desperately, but they were researchers and scientists, not soldiers. Against trained human Marines, they had no chance. The few military personnel on the station died quickly. Led a team to the main data storage facility. She had memorized its location during her captivity. Inside, they found computer systems containing records of thousands of experiments, torture sessions, medical procedures, psychological tests, all performed on captive aliens from dozens of species that had been doing this for decades. Download everything, ordered. Every file, every video, every piece of data. While the Marines worked on the computers, found something else. A list of other research stations, locations throughout this region of space. They weren't just operating here. This was an empire of torture and experimentation. She transmitted the information to Admiral Wu on the Eternal Watch. Admiral, you need to see this. They have multiple stations like this one. They've been capturing and experimenting on aliens for years. Wu's voice came back hard and angry. Understood, Captain, we'll deal with them. Are you secure? For now, but Admiral, they were broadcasting my torture sessions as entertainment. They sent it to other stations. We need to respond. We need to show them what happens when you hurt humans. There was a pause, then Wu said, "What do you recommend, Captain?" Looked around the data storage room, at the records of suffering and death, at the casual cruelty that had inflicted on thousands of beings. Her face hardened. We make them watch what they created. We show them what a human looks like when you push her too far. And then we show them what humanity does to those who harm its own. An hour later, every station in the region received a broadcast. It showed footage that the Marines had recovered from the research station, being tortured, suffering, screaming in pain while scientists took notes. But then the broadcast showed something else. It showed escaping. It showed her killing. It showed her tearing through the station like an avenging demon, taking down guard after guard. It showed the human fleet arriving and the Marines storming the station. And then it showed the aftermath. The research station burning in space as human ships surrounded it. Admiral Wu appeared on screen, his face stern. "I am Admiral Wu of the human military fleet. You have captured, tortured, and attempted to break one of our people. You have killed 2 others. You thought humans were primitive specimens for your amusement. You were wrong." The image shifted to show standing beside him, bandaged but alive and fierce. "This is Captain. You tried to break her. You failed. Because humans don't break. We adapt. We endure. We fight back. And we never forget." Wu continued, "This is your only warning. Any ship or station that approaches human space will be destroyed. Any who harms a human will face total warfare. You wanted to study us. You wanted to understand our limits. Now you know. Our limit is that we have no limit when defending our own." The broadcast ended, but its message was clear. They had made an enemy they couldn't defeat. In the following weeks, the human fleet moved through the sector systematically. They located every research station on its list. They gave the aliens one chance to surrender and release all prisoners. Some stations, those were merely occupied and shut down. Others resisted. Those were destroyed. The Empire tried to organize a military response, but they were researchers and scientists, not warriors. Their fleet tactics were designed for capturing unarmed vessels, not fighting an aggressive military force. Human ships tore through their defenses. Within 2 months, the Empire sued for peace. The terms were harsh. All research stations would be shut down. All prisoners would be released. They would pay reparations to the species they had harmed, and a human military base would be established in their territory to ensure compliance. They agreed to everything. They had no choice. Back on a human medical ship, was recovering. Had also survived and was in the bed next to hers. They talked quietly about the mission, about everything that had happened. Admiral Wu visited them both. "Captain, engineer, you should know that your actions have changed everything. The galaxy knows about humans now. They know we don't accept torture or cruelty. They know we protect our own at any cost." Smiled weakly. Did we start a war, Admiral? No, Wu said. You prevented one. They were planning to expand their operations. Other species would have been captured and experimented on. Your escape and our response stopped that. You saved thousands of lives. Spoke up for the first time. What about the other species, the ones that were holding? All freed. We're helping them return to their home worlds. Many of them are grateful to humanity. We're making allies across the sector. Looked out the window at the stars. They called me a primitive specimen. They thought I was weak. They learned otherwise, Wu said, the hard way. What happens now? Asked. Now you recover, you heal. And when you're ready, if you want to, you'll be given a new command, a bigger ship, a more important mission. What you did, surviving what you survived and still fighting back. That's already becoming a story that humans tell each other. You're a symbol now, of human strength, of our refusal to be victims. Thought about the weeks of torture, the pain, the suffering, the moment when she had finally struck back. I just did what any human would do, she said quietly. I refused to quit. Exactly, Wu said. That's what makes us human, and that's what they failed to understand. They could hurt your body, they could make you suffer, but they couldn't break your spirit, because the human spirit doesn't break. It bends, it adapts, and then it strikes back. He saluted her and left, lay back in her bed, exhausted but satisfied. They had captured her. They had tried to break her. They had tortured her for their entertainment. It was the biggest mistake they ever made, because in trying to understand human limits, they had learned a terrible truth. Humans pushed to their limit don't break. They become something far more dangerous. They become survivors who fight back. And nothing in the galaxy was more terrifying than a human who had been pushed too far and refused to stay down. The story of Captain spread across human space and beyond. It became a warning to anyone who thought humanity was weak. It became inspiration for humans facing their own struggles. And it became a promise. Touch one of us and you touch all of us. Harm one of us and we will come for you. Try to break us and you'll learn what happens when humans fight back. They had wanted to study humanity. They got their wish. They learned everything they needed to know about what makes humans dangerous. And they would never forget the lesson.